Welcome everyone to Professional Pioneers with Provision Podcast. I'm your host Dr. Muhammad Junaid Ismail, and as you may well know, Provision Alliance NGO has set its sights on eradicating unemployment, helping the youth discover and forge their dream careers, and propelling them into becoming the future leaders of industry that our country so desperately needs. This podcast is inspired to help aspiring professionals understand and discover the careers they may well go into. Have you ever found yourself asking, how do I become a doctor or a lawyer? How do I start a business? Where do I study? And how do I get funding? These are some of the questions we will be answering on our podcast with our variety of guests who come from humble beginnings and have inspirational stories of how they've overcome the obstacles. And here is where they will share their advice and wisdom they've gotten along the way. Good day everyone, and welcome to Professional Pioneers with Provision Podcast. Today we would love to welcome an amazing guest, someone that I know personally. She is a civil engineer, she's qualified. She's been working for many years. She's come through quite an interesting journey, and we invited her here today to share some of her experiences, her journey towards becoming a civil engineer as a person of color and a female in a predominantly male-dominated industry. And we wanted to bring the message across to anyone who wants to do civil engineering, but particularly young ladies who are aspiring to do this field. So welcome Mieska, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be here and share my story with everyone.
Okay, so let's start by just kind of getting people to know who is Mieska.
Okay, so like yourself, I was also born in Mitchell's Plain. And so that was my being a colored kid from the Cape Flats. You're obviously you being dealt a certain hand in life.
Yeah.
And so there are many things that many obstacles that you have to overcome, definitely more than your peers, especially when you go to like university. You'll get to you'll kind of then you'll see where you come from and where other people come from, and you'll kind of see that the journeys were not the same. And I don't know how it was for you, but sometimes for me I kind of felt a bit isolated at university because you couldn't relate to people on that level. So it felt a bit isolating sometimes. But I feel like that's going to change. I have hope in the future. I feel like there'll be more people that will, I feel like we're paving that path for others. And I feel like by the time the younger generation gets there, I feel like it'll be a lot better for them.
I definitely
socially.
agree. And that makes me think of like my high school experience, because I went to local school, primary school in Mitchell's Plain, and then I got the scholarship to Wynberg, which I think is somewhat of a representation of university as well, because it's like the demographic is more affluent, different kind of perception of people, life, that sort of thing. And there was a big difference between like what problems I was facing and problems people in my school were facing, and like there was a lot of times, as you said, where I felt like I couldn't really relate to these people. How did you find that switch from high school to university in terms of just the space socially and then also the workload?
Socially, definitely both. Like socially, it was definitely like a culture shock. I've had to you have to kind of adapt and kind of you have to be adaptable. That's a really big trait that you need to have, is to be adaptable. In terms of so socially there were definitely challenges, there's a lot of stigma attached to being like a colored kid from the Cape Flats. So people tend to put you in a box almost instantly. So that's also one of the challenges that you have to face, but I think it's not a bad thing. I think you need to use it kind of like I feel like you inspire me in that way, where you kind of use it as your power, like as your strength. As an inspirational story. So and in terms of studies, definitely it was a huge difference. University is a lot more challenging than school, so there's this big jump between high school and tertiary education, and then especially going into something like engineering, it's quite demanding and quite challenging. So you've so I think being like resilient and being tenacious and like all of those qualities will help you get find your way through that challenging time space of your life.
I'd first like to say thank you for that. That's a really beautiful comment. I think a lot of it's about kind of your perspective on your situation, and I think it's worse in Cape Town, because Cape Town has a bit of classism in most spaces. So thank you for that. But with regards to also the workload itself with engineering, what was the work like? Was it a lot of studying? Was it a lot of calculations?
So a lot of Kind of so you have to be. It's more like mathematically. You have to be mathematically inclined.
Yeah.
You have to be very disciplined. Like discipline is a big. So even with me, like I have ADHD.
Yeah.
And I've had to. You kind of have to like push through it, and you kind of have to develop sort of certain skills and coping mechanisms to get through it. But like what I noticed when I went to university was like there were people who obviously came from like you said more affluent backgrounds, and they had an advantage because they came from better schools and all of those things, so their standard of education was a bit higher than yours. But I think that didn't hold me back, because what I had was like drive, and I didn't like failing at something. Although failure is fine, but you can't, because you had more to lose. You have more to lose than your peers, because you're there on a bursary.
Yes, I can relate to that.
So you've got more to lose than your peers. So I had that driving me. So like you can use like your circumstances, you can use it as your strength. You can use it to drive you, and not hold you back. So.
I agree with you. It's a matter of perspective. Like
it is.
You can kind of look at your circumstances and look at other people and kind of think, well, these people have so much of an edge above me, and like you can kind of go into this negative spiral. But I think it's really honorable that you use that to propel you and to kind of motivate you, and it takes a certain type of mindset to push through. And I think a large part of that, because I know exactly what you're talking about, like you have kind of like pressure of being on a bursary, and you don't want to disappoint your family, and you don't want to disappoint the bursaries, so it can drive you. And I mean, look, sometimes it can also like make things difficult in terms of your mental health, because like other people, I don't know if you had the same experience where their parents are paying their fees, they're going to university thinking, look, if I fail, it's not the end of the world, I'll just repeat the year. Whereas for us, it's like, if you fail, chances are you're out, it's done, like your chance is gone. So that pressure can also really cause a lot of mental health issues. You did mention you have ADHD. I also have ADHD, so interestingly, it's a topic that I want to research in the Cape Flats community, because I feel like there's a lot of things in the community that drives that sort of thing. But just to come back, I think a lot of people, I'm assuming at the time it was undiagnosed, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people who have undiagnosed ADHD, they really struggle to organize, to kind of time manage, that sort of thing. So we learn through the experience, but it does help to be self-aware, so I'm sure that first day of university was probably
I will say, like initially I didn't and in the first year I actually suffered from depression, so that actually came in because of the ADHD. But I will say initially I didn't find my rhythm like so quickly. Like it took a bit of like making mistakes. Like I failed a module in first year, and that made me depressed, because like I didn't know how to handle failure. That was a big lesson that I needed to learn, was like, how do I you need to learn how to handle failure and how to use it to drive you, and like to do better and whatever. But it's a good lesson to learn in life. So after that, it kind of like I kind of like realized, okay, no, I needed to be a little bit more disciplined, a little bit more focused, and put in a little bit more work. And I think that, so eventually I think I found like ways where I like eventually you won't get it right the first time, and you won't know it all initially, and it is a scary environment, and it's not going to be perfect, and the whole situation's not going to be perfect, but you kind of have to push through it. Like if you just push through it, you will get to the other side where things become a little bit easier, and you find your way, and you find like your support structure as well, and like that's that's an important thing. You have to find your support structure, whether it's like in your faith or friends or your lecturers or like mentors at university, or cousins or somebody, like you find your support structure. I think that's a big thing for me.
I was going through med school, same kind of experience, where like in the first year, whether you're kind of just going out a lot or you're just kind of trying to get used to this new environment, where you don't have anyone kind of checking up on you or watching you or kind of reprimanding you, and I think having that support structure is so important, because it's an understatement to say it's stressful, because of the volume of the work and the difficulty of the work, the amount of time you have to put in, and the time that you are putting in, that entire duration you're under stress. So if you don't have like people to debrief with, people who are going to give you positive affirmations, because like with that, even when you mentioned the depression thing, it's something that I also went through, and especially if you're someone, and I'm sure you can relate to this, if you're someone that did really well in high school, university can be like, a wake-up call.
It can humble you a little.
Because, it's interesting that people who do really well in high school with ADHD type traits, they kind of go unmarked. They kind of mask because your brain kind of solves things quickly. And I know a lot of students can probably relate to this, where like you don't really have to work as hard, and then you get to university and you don't actually have the skills because that quick thinking and that night before studying, it doesn't work anymore, because there's so much work. So now you actually have to have the skills to get through so much work. And so like the first few, like even the first semester, like I was still doing things I did in high school, where I would like study the week before, that sort of thing. And when I got my marks, like I was like, who is this guy? I don't, this is not me.
It's a humbling experience.
And then you learn. So it's often you find that people who are hardworking, like throughout high school, not to say that we didn't work hard, but people who are hardworking and don't necessarily have that initial like upper hand, they actually fare a bit better in university, just because they have the skills to get through the content and prioritize and time manage and that sort of thing. Okay, so when you were going through that university experience, right, and you were kind of nearing the end, what was your kind of perspective on where you wanted to take engineering? Because I don't really know how it works. Is it like general in the beginning? Do you get exposure to specializations?
So there are many disciplines in engineering. I'm civil, so I'm a civil engineer, and I didn't know, because with civil engineering it's quite broad. You can go into structures, coastal, water, traffic, like bridges, structures. So it's even within structures there are like sub-disciplines. So it's so broad. Like you could literally, there are so many things you could do. I was sort of taking a liking to transportation, because I did my thesis in transportation. I did my design project in transportation in my final year. So I felt like that was the way. But also I think I was kind of guided in that direction, because I got a bursary with Masaki Sizwe. It's a government bursary, so it's a Western Cape government bursary. So they funded my tertiary education from the start, and they paid, like they covered everything. So it was my tuition, accommodation, textbooks, stationery, everything. So I was lucky enough to get the Masaki Sizwe bursary. And so because Mieska Arendorf, they are part of the Department of Public Works and Transport. Well, it's now Department of Infrastructure, but formerly known as Department of Public Works and Transport. So because I got a bursary from them, I was kind of sort of geared like sort of guided in that direction.
Okay.
But in any case, I was kind of sort of inclined in that towards that. Yeah. So that's how I found myself in transportation.
Okay.
So like.
And with regards to kind of in that first 2 years, do you like do like what courses do you do, like math?
Okay, so
science?
it's quite so first 2 years is quite math intense, like mathematically intense, and like applied math, which is similar to like physics.
Okay.
So it's quite intense in the first 2 years in terms of like, you know, mathematics and doing like post calculus and engineering math.
Yeah.
For the first 2 years, and also applied math as well, and advanced applied maths. And then it's also quite general. So in civil engineering, because it's so broad, you do like a lot of subjects. You do geology, like the study of rocks and with soil and material. And you also do at Stellenbosch. I was at Stellenbosch University, and at Stellenbosch you do a lot of programming as well. So it's quite broad and quite diverse. There's a lot of different kinds of subjects that you do. You do also like structural design, material science. There were quite a few subjects. I can't actually remember all of them.
No, that's okay.
But it's quite diverse and broad in your first 2 years, and also your classes are much bigger in the first 2 years.
Okay.
And I don't know if this is a general thing. I don't know if it was like that in medicine as well. But your classes are quite big in the first 2 years. University is quite like a fast-paced environment. You are like you're in big, huge classes, like big halls. So you kind of just have to like. There's no one like watching you and telling you what to do. You kind of, that's why you have to be very self-disciplined, because you kind of have to you have to do things for yourself. You have to be self-motivated and self-disciplined. So that's a very big thing as well. So
okay. And with that bursary, how did you find out about it?
Yes, so with the bursary thing, quite interesting. When I was in high school, there was this organization. I feel like it's similar to yours. It was called Go for Gold. I'm not sure if they're still around, but they were also like a non-profit organization, and they also had like, so they approached like different schools in the Cape Flats, in Cape Town, within Cape Town area. And they obviously approach the more like top performing students in those schools, and they give you like, basically it's an opportunity where you get like extra math and science classes. So it's usually on weekends and like once a week, and they'll have like transportation to come and pick you up and then take you to the venue, and you get like extra classes like maths and science. So I was part of that program, and within that program, in addition to the math classes, they would also like mentor us, and you know, like so they were actually the people who kind of told me about the bursaries. I wouldn't have known about it. So they kind of like helped us with the bursaries, like sort of informed us and gave us like information on all the different bursaries that were available out there within like the civil engineering construction industry. So it was focused on that as well. And so that was how I kind of knew about bursaries and how to apply and all of those things.
It's so similar to my experience, because the scholarship I got to high school, the only reason I applied to and got so many bursaries for university was because they kind of facilitated that. So they gave us the applications, they told us the due dates and what documents we needed and stuff. And so I think that's kind of part of what Provision is trying to do, is that we are trying to make that information known to everyone. Because I do think, similar to that program that kind of recruited you in a way, a lot of programs do focus on like the top students, because it makes sense. We have limited resources. We have to kind of put our resources where we believe it's best going to yield a positive outcome. I think what Provision is trying to do is more to make it more readily available and kind of different levels. So even things like free courses, online courses, different levels of courses, maybe there's NQF levels, there's maybe lower down levels that can allow people to enter the job market, you know what I mean? So it's amazing that the programs that we experience is out there, but I do think it is limited, because to come back to my experience as even going to the high school I went to, whenever I came home, a lot of my friends who were in the local high schools, they were kind of within the influences of drugs and gangsterism and that sort of thing. And a lot of them they didn't necessarily have the tools academically, but they were amazing sportsmen, they could sing amazingly, they could dance, they could do so many things. And there's like bursaries, apprenticeships and things like that also out there, you know. And I think for the most part, we are limited at the moment to academics geared towards high performing students. So it's quite interesting that we had a very similar experience, and I think a lot of the top performing students, there's already that structure to kind of get them into a career. So yeah, part of this is also trying to kind of expose people to the kind of different spaces.
Like make it more accessible to everybody, more inclusive and more accessible, because you don't want to be just the exception. Like I don't know, it's not such a great feeling just being the exception. I think it's better if you can see everyone else succeed and like just changing the narrative. And so I think it's so important, because I mean, look, even when I was in high school, whenever I mentioned where I was from, people would have this kind of negative reaction. And like my experience of people in the Cape Flats, there's a lot of negative experiences that you could have, but there's a lot of positive as well. And I think a lot of students coming from the Cape Flats or townships, their perception of their community and their perception maybe of themselves even is of a negative kind of narrative. And I think the more we get stories out there of people that have come from these communities and have done amazing things, the more people can see that, you know, this is not a place that only breeds certain types of individuals. So again, it's really amazing to have you here and to have you represent, you know, different communities in this space. But yeah, so to kind of come back to engineering, so how long have you been in the field now? Can you tell us about how your experience has been as a woman of color? As a woman of color. Well, when I graduated in 2016, I think I was like one of 2 colored females in the civil engineering class that graduated that year. It was quite a low percentage. It was very, very low. In 2016, I think I was like one of 2 colored females in the civil engineering class that graduated that year. It was quite a low percentage. It was very, very low. But that wasn't, I felt like once I entered the workplace, it was kind of like a big sort of wake up call, because then I felt like the minority. And I am part of the minority, I'm part of the marginalized group, but it became more apparent when I stepped into the workplace. So yes, I graduated in 2016. And then because I was part of the Masaki C3 bursary program, which is affiliated with the Department of Public Transport, they've got a graduate program. So once you graduate, you can get a job with them, and then they kind of like train you to get you to being professionally registered, like board certified, basically. So I then interviewed for the graduate program, and then I got selected. And also part of that selection, I was like the only female engineer. And there were like four males, and I was the only female engineer. So then once I got selected for the graduate program, so there's also a lot of other companies who also have these graduate programs for young professionals. So when you get out of university, it's just like a structured program to get you the adequate professional exposure and experience that you need in order to be a good engineer and be fully competent, but also to be able to register professionally with the Engineering Council of South Africa, EXA. So I was part of this program, and then they seconded me to the private sector, so I worked a year in construction to get like practical experience, and then after that I went into consulting design. So then I was seconded by the government to the private sector. I worked for a consulting firm. My background is actually I work for diverse, because I don't want to get too specific. That's fine.
Okay, so you mentioned the registration with EXA.
Yes.
How does that work? Like, how many years do you have to work?
Okay.
And what does that mean for, like, in terms of your financial freedom and your capabilities as an engineer?
Okay, so that is a big deal in engineering. You have to work towards it. You have to sort of, with EXA, it's an accreditation, and so once you graduate university as an engineer, and this applies to all disciplines, it applies to mechanical, electrical, chemical, all the disciplines of engineering, they all have to get registered with the Engineering Council of South Africa. Eventually, it's just it's a board for engineering, and it's the purpose of EXA is to just ensure that engineers who practice in the field are fully competent, and that standards in engineering, the regulations in engineering are standardized across South Africa, and that they uphold the standard of engineering in South Africa. So that's essentially what it basically means, and you have to work towards it, and you do an application for it. So you have to gain certain experiences at a certain level of responsibility in your career from start. And you kind of have to keep record of that. And then once you get to a level where you feel like you are working at a high level of responsibility, you can then apply. And you'll submit like a report to them, like a long report with mini reports as well. So like your training experience reports, and then you also do like a big report for them. And then once you've submitted that, they'll call you for an interview, a professional review, and then you'll have to like answer questions to a panel of professionals. And so it is quite a daunting experience, but it's very fulfilling, and it's like once you get it, it's quite a fulfilling feeling. And
that's an amazing achievement. And because I know for us, like as medical doctors, like similar to your graduate program, we had the internship and the community service, and I think what would kind of be similar to that would be specializing. But interestingly for doctors, there's quite a limitation when moving overseas, for example. So if I wanted to go to Australia or the UK, I would have to do, even if I was specialized as, let's say, for example, a psychiatrist in South Africa, I would have to do exams in their country in order to practice as a psychiatrist. Is it the same for engineering, or?
No, it's actually not. So the wonderful thing about EXA is that it is acknowledged by other councils in other countries as well. So with me, I'm also chartered. I'm a chartered engineer as well with Engineers Ireland. And that happened through a mutual recognition agreement between EXA and Ireland. But EXA has this agreement with other councils. Other, So with me, because I had my professional registration with EXA, I was able to go and work in Ireland. Also, as they call it, a chartered engineer. In South Africa, we call it professional engineer, but it's the same as being chartered. So in most other places, they'll refer to it as chartered. And so yes, I got my chartered title through the mutual recognition agreement. And so I went overseas and I worked abroad for a while.
And how was that experience? That sounds
good.
Amazing.
That was good. I got to do a lot of traveling because I was based in Europe. I got to see a bit of like a few countries in Europe, so it was nice in that way that you get to learn about other cultures. You get to see how other people live in other parts of the world, and I think that just broadens your horizon. And I think it's a wonderful experience, even if it's not a permanent thing. I think it's nice to do as a short-term stint.
I know there's a lot of people, especially some of our students. They want to go overseas, they have these dreams of going overseas. And I think sometimes we have an idea of what it would be like, because I think as South Africans, we tend to, for some reason, focus on the negatives about South Africa, and we glamorize the first world. So I just wanted to know from your side, like you went there, you had experiences, was there any particular country you enjoyed? Is there anyone that you would stay for long term? Or would you stay in South Africa long term? Like, just to get some idea for those who want to go overseas.
I agree with you, and you're right when you say people tend to glamorize like life abroad. I think South Africa is a wonderful country. I think we produce amazing professionals. Like when I looked at our engineers abroad, like our standard of engineering versus theirs, I was like so shocked to see how good we are here in South Africa. I feel like we're a developing country, so there's so much potential, so many more opportunities here. You just have to find, you have to seek them out. So you kind of have to, they're not going to come to you, you have to put yourself in that position to receive those opportunities. For me personally, I love South Africa. I think it's a wonderful country. I think there's so many amazing things about our country, and I know we have like a dark history, and I feel like, but we're moving forward, and I think it's going to take a while for us to get to that point where, you know, we are all sort of equal and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think the future is looking good. Yeah.
And the countries you visited,
Oh yes.
what were some of the nice ones?
Oh yes.
Because I want to know also.
Yeah. So I've been traveling, but I got to see more places while I was there. So I went to like Netherlands, Belgium, France, Italy. I will say that Netherlands was a favorite.
Okay.
I do like the Netherlands. I think there's a lot of South Africans for those that are wanting to move abroad or wanting to do it even for short term. I think like there's a lot of South Africans in the Netherlands and Ireland. I was in Ireland. Ireland's also a wonderful place. There's a lot of South Africans there as well. And as well as Netherlands. I like the Netherlands because we know Afrikaans and they speak Dutch. You can kind of understand. So you can find your way. You can navigate around that space. I didn't find it too difficult, like understanding signs, and you know, you can kind of pick up what they're saying. So you can read the menus and stuff like that. So I like the culture in Netherlands, but because I'm a transport engineer, I found it interesting because I would look at it through the lens of a transport engineer. So I would look at the transportation systems. So they've got so many modes of transportation there, like, you know, trams, trains, they call it metros, trams, and buses. But it was just, and also it's a lot of like, it's called the city of bikes. So in Netherlands you see everyone riding a bike, like it's. So I love that about Netherlands. So for me, I found that fascinating, and I just like the culture there. And also there's also quite a lot of South Africans in Netherlands as well. So I think that's a good place for us to go. But it all depends on you as a person. Yeah.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So, as a young girl, when you were growing up, you know, looking at who you are now and the amazing things you've done, what do you think she would say to you now?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I definitely think there are things that she didn't think would be possible, and that became, reality. And I think, wow, that's a very interesting question. That's quite a deep question. I think she would be proud, but I think she also needed to know that she would have to overcome many, many obstacles to get there, and she would needed to be very resilient. It's not easy. Like the path isn't easy, and the message we're trying to convey to your mentees and the people watching this is that if you come from a disadvantaged background, you're gonna face more obstacles, you're going to face more challenges, and you can't compare yourself to your peers who come from more
affluent backgrounds,
yes,
more resources.
You can't compare yourself to them. You kind of have to focus on your own journey and focus on yourself, and you're not competing with anyone else. You're just trying to be a better you.
100%,
and
100%.
So yeah, I think she would be proud. I think it's also important. This is something it's a big lesson that I've learned in my life, is that you shouldn't allow other people to project their limitations onto you,
100%.
because a lot of people try to do that with me as well. And luckily, I think my mom instilled these values in me to be super like strong-willed and confident, that I didn't allow those things to deter me, but they could deter other people. So I think don't allow people to project their limitations onto you, because if you have big dreams and you're surrounded by people who have smaller dreams, or they don't even know how to dream big, they are going to project their limitations onto you and try to kill your spirit. So I think it's important to focus on your dreams, keep that end goal in mind. You know what you want your future to look like. Now you have to do the work to get there to that point. So
interestingly enough, I think having that bigger picture thinking is so important, and I think partly having an ADHD or a neurodivergent brain makes it easier to kind of see the bigger picture, but it's a bit more difficult to work through the steps, whereas I feel like a lot of people struggle with seeing that bigger picture, and I think a lot of people struggle to think beyond the immediate, or the issues that they face. And I think for a lot of people, like how I saw it, coming back to like comparing people I went to high school with, like there's always this one story I quote. Like I was thinking about like issues at home, like family not having money and this and that and this, friends in the hospital and that. And then I would hear the kind of problems my mates were going through. And like this one guy was literally having a breakdown. I'm like, what's going on? Like, what's the matter? And he's like, nah, bro, like the waves this weekend, I can't surf. And I'm like, oh my God. So that's, oh. So like, I think what you said is so true. Like everyone has their own issues and their own problems. And like you can't compare your problems or your life circumstances to other people, because that kind of breeds this discontent and a lot of negativity. I think the best thing is to focus on where you want to be. So when I used to visit my friends' homes, like in these nice areas, like instead of being like, oh my God, like why didn't I get this when I was growing up, I'd look at it and be like, I want that in my house. And how do you get that? And then I would like end up speaking to their parents and be like, what do you do? Like, I wanna, like, how do you build this? You know what I mean? So having that optimistic perspective and focusing on where you want to be instead of where you are is really important. And the other thing you mentioned that is so important is not letting other people project their failures onto you. Like I resonate with that so much. And it be your own people. Like it can literally be your family telling you like you can't do this. Like one of the things I experienced was in primary school I used to come like first in grade every year, and like my dad's side of the family always used to be like, oh, but it's just because it's like a bad school. Right?
Yeah, they would say that.
So then when I went to high school, the first time I was at Weinberg, I came third. And instead of being like, yo, that's an amazing accomplishment, they were like, oh, why didn't you come first? I was like, ah. And then when I started to come first, like you just hear the descending voices quieting. And like it got to the point where like people wouldn't even want, the people who used to like bully me and say all these negative things about me, as soon as I started to achieve, they would even try and avoid me because they now had nothing over me and they felt ashamed of what they used to say. And I didn't even have to ever say anything, and I wasn't never the type of person to be like, oh, look what I've done. But that kind of just shows that like the best kind of revenge against people who say negative things about you or don't believe in you is to show them what you're made of.
100%.
And I think it's such an important thing to use that as fuel. I mean, some people might say, look, that's toxic fuel, but sometimes when you come from a difficult space and you're trying to go to something that's so difficult from where you're starting, you need to have some fuel, you know what I mean? And you can't allow those things to pull you down and to hold you back. So I think that's such an important lesson, and I relate to that so much.
I think it's also like not seeking external validation because, like you say, people are going to just be sometimes negative, and you don't want to base that. You don't want to base your worth on external validation. Yeah. So you just want to make sure. That's why I say you just want to make sure you focus on yourself and you block out the outside noise, because you know where you need to be. And it's about finding that balance between seeing the bigger picture and looking at what the next step is ahead, because you need to get through the little steps to get to the bigger picture. So you need to find a balance between the two. You keep your eye on the prize, but you also need to know, okay, this is what I need to do now. This is what I need to do next. Because you have to take a step by step, because it does also sometimes seem daunting. When you're looking at the bigger picture, it can feel daunting and it can be like, okay, no, I don't think I can reach that point. Even on the day of my graduation, I found the whole experience to be so surreal, because I was like, oh my God, did I actually get here? Like, am I actually here? Am I actually graduating? I didn't think throughout my studies, because it didn't go so smoothly, and it's because it's challenging and it's difficult. At some certain points in my studies, I didn't think I would get there. So for me, that was such a surreal experience when I actually got to that point, and I was like, oh my God, I'm here. Like, I made it.
Congratulations. That's really amazing. And it's so inspiring to hear people's stories. I think it's really important, because a lot of people who might want to do engineering, but they look where they are right now and they're like, yo, it looks like it's such a difficult thing, or the fees are so expensive, or how am I going to get a bursary, just knowing that someone went through it, you also had doubts, you also were struggling, and you got through it, and you graduated, you started working, you qualified in EXA, which is amazing. I know from what Sonia said, it's quite a difficult thing, and it takes many years, and you've done it at this young age. And also you've traveled overseas. Like, I think that's such an inspiring story, and I think it just shows people where you can end up if you stay committed, if you push through, if you do the work. So yeah, that's really amazing. So I just wanted to have maybe one more kind of nugget of advice for our viewers. Is there anything particularly you would like to say, or is there anything that you felt carried you to where you are today, and you live your life by?
I think I want everyone to know that we all have the potential to get there. You shouldn't look at yourself and be like, that could never be me. You and I have the same potential, and it's just about harnessing that potential and like putting in the work and believing in yourself. Like, it's such a cliche, but it truly is believing in yourself. You will feel imposter syndrome, and even in engineering is not meant for males. It's meant for people who are mathematically inclined, people who have problem solving skills. You need to just be mentally able. Like, you just need to have that capabilities in order to do engineering. It's not solely meant for males, so don't be deterred by that, and don't be
outside of kind of that engineering, that kind of things that kind of drive or govern your life. Is there any advice in that regard?
Okay.
Into how you stayed kind of on your track?
Yes. So I kind of knew what I wanted my life to look like, and I knew where I was starting, but I knew where I wanted to be at. And having that goal and vision, that kind of helped me and kept me on track to getting where I needed to be. So I think just have that vision of what you want your life to look like. And I lost my train of thought. That's my ADHD.
That's okay. So I actually want to come back to that. You can have a dream, right? And you look at where you are now. How do you set that plan in motion from your perspective? Like, is it just kind of something where you're like, okay, maybe from my perspective, I wanted to be a doctor, right? So I realized, okay, I need to study medicine. So I did some research on medicine, and I was like, 6 years, it's like 100,000 rand a year. So I was like, there's no way I can pay this. So I was like, okay, what next? I need a bursary. How do I get a bursary? I have to get certain marks. So, for me, it felt like just setting a milestone, and then trying to work towards that milestone. Was it similar for you, or was it a bit different? Like, did you plan kind of step for step up until that complete end goal, or was it like I work towards a milestone, and as I get to that milestone, I set my next milestone?
I think you have to focus on things that are also within your control. So it's definitely possible for everyone. I think it's possible, even if it's idealistic or whatever. I think it's possible for everyone to get there where they want. So what is within your control is that you can focus at school, you can work hard, or you can focus on your sport and try and get a sport bursary as well. But just know that there are ways and means of getting you there. There are bursaries, there are financial aids that can help you at university. So don't let that stop you from pursuing your goals and dreams, because there are ways of doing so, and there's financial aid out there, and there are bursaries. So you kind of just have to look at, okay, what can I do to get to that point? Because you have to get yourself to those in that position to receive those opportunities, and that is one way of doing it.
I could definitely relate to that. I think what stops people is what you were saying earlier. Like, people have this skill or this ability, and they don't have
firstly, they don't have information, right? So they don't know that skill that they have, they can actually build on that and pursue a career in that. So like, for example, people I grew up with, they were amazing at soccer. But in their mind, it was just like, I'm the best at soccer in this area. And that's the end of it. You know what I mean? Like they whether it's the circumstances not allowing them to think bigger than that, or whether it's people kind of telling them like, oh, but you'll never be this good, you know, irrespective of what it is, people aren't able to think beyond that circumstance. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, not just people in like difficult financial situations, but even if like you're in a family where there's a lot of conflict, or you're in a space where there's instability, you know, you kind of get caught in that bubble and you can't think further. So it's not necessarily like an instinct, you know. And so that's also what we want to try and drive to our audience, is that thinking ahead and thinking towards your future is really, really important, and it shouldn't be something that, you know, perpetually causes anxiety. And it will be like that in the beginning. You might find that when you're thinking about your future, it becomes really uncomfortable, and you kind of want to stop, because you're like, the first thing you'll start thinking is like, oh, but I can't do that, like there's all these obstacles in my way, I can't afford that, but I'm not good enough, you know. All of these thoughts are normal, and I think with a lot of us who have been able to push through those difficult thoughts, or who are able to actually get to the point where we can think about the future in a positive light and start to see a future that's better than where we are, a lot of that came from having support and having good feedback, you know, in, like, for example, in school, like working hard and seeing the results of it. So it may be that you haven't really seen the results of your talent or of your ability, but if you put in the time and you put in the practice and you stick to it, no matter what people say, no matter who is telling you that you can't achieve it, once you start to put in the time, you'll start to see the results. And once you start to see the results, it will be much easier for you to think positively about the future. And once you get to that point, all you have to do then is gather your information. So if you are a singer and, you know, you finally had this kind of epiphany that actually I want to be as famous as Tyler, for example, then you ask yourself, well, how do I get there? I need to do competitions, I need to get a vocal coach, I need to X, Y, and Z. But you won't get to that point of planning your future and setting the steps in motion if you believe that you'll never get there, and if you aren't willing to try.
But you also have to be very proactive in your life, and you have to help yourself. And you can't have like a victim mentality. It's important not to have a victim mentality. It's okay to feel sorry for yourself, but it shouldn't last very long. You need to think about, okay, how can I help myself? And be proactive in your own life. It's just be proactive in your own life. That's it. But also, I think this is where provision comes in. Like this, you are sort of guiding these people and mentoring these students, and showing them that there are ways and means of getting to that point.
To that end goal. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. All right. Any last words for the people?
I just want to wish everyone luck on their journey, and yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Mieska, for joining
honored.
us. It is amazing having you. Loved hearing your story. I feel like I know you a lot better now. And I'm sure you inspired a lot of people. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe, and share with all your friends and family. Also, check us out on our social medias via Provision NGO. Until next time.